I'm Ellie La Liberté. Why hundreds of activists came out to the Capitol today in support of trans youth.
Remembering Tony Robinson 10 years later, I'm Tanisha Shaw, live at memorial events going on right now.
Also, leaders at UW-Madison are sounding the alarm about losing research and operations due to federal funding cuts.
She will be devastated if some of the things that she has in place are no longer, because she is used to living a very independent life.
And later, concerns over possible cuts to Medicaid, what those cuts would mean for the program and those in Wisconsin who rely on it. We welcome you to News 3 Now at 6. Good evening. I'm Eric Franke. Thanks for joining us.
And I'm Sarah Carlson. Wisconsin legislators have been hearing public comment on the rights of transgender youth in school since 10 o'clock this morning.
Our Ellie La Liberté was at the Assembly Committee on Education and shows what supporters and critics of the proposed legislation are saying.
You know, we've got some obviously contentious, emotional bills today.
Standing room only as hundreds of people filled this room in the Capitol, waiting for hours to have their voices heard.
Parents, school districts, and governments cannot dictate how youth identify.
A majority in opposition of the two bills before the committee.
Please vote no.
One of those bills bars transgender athletes from competing in women's sports in both public and private schools, as well as in the locker room. The other requires parental consent to change a student's name or pronouns in the classroom.
I would urge your support for the bill.
Supporters of the legislation say that it helps parents protect their children.
Transitioning and changing your name is a major life choice, is something parents should be involved in.
Please, for the good of our society, save our youth from mutilating their bodies and destroying their minds.
But critics say it could put trans youth at risk.
This legislation will shape the school environments in Wisconsin, forcing teachers to withhold basic respect from trans students who may be already struggling with a lack of acceptance at home.
Also noting the likelihood that the bills won't even go anywhere.
Let's face it, this is political theater.
They face almost certain veto from Democratic Governor Tony Evers if they pass in both chambers of the legislature.
Trans and non-binary youth are at higher risk of suicide. And debates like this increase that risk. These debates harm our trans and non-binary youth.
Reporting at the state capitol, Ellie La Liberté, News 3 Now.
Ellie, thank you. This legislation is also not new. Both bills were introduced last session and were unsuccessful.
One person is dead and 2 children are hurt after a crash in Madison this afternoon. It happened between Raymond Road and South Gammon. First responders got a call just after 4 o'clock about this crash. 1 adult was pronounced dead at the scene and 2 children were taken to a hospital. Their conditions are considered non-life-threatening. Stay with News 3 Now and Channel 3000 as we continue to look into this developing story.
Today marks 10 years since Madison police officer Matt Kenny shot and killed Tony Robinson.
The case sparked protests across the city and ended up gaining national attention. Today, community members are hosting memorial events to honor Robinson.
Our Tanisha Shaw is live at one of those events right now. Tanisha, what events are being held this evening?
Come on, Mom, you know the song too.
Hi, Eric and Sarah. Right now, I'm at a Jump on the Mic for Justice event. This is honoring Tony Robinson. I know you can hear the people in the background and you can see all around me. I really wish I could get you a better view, but there's not an empty seat really in sight. There's been people on the mic that's been doing poetry, singing, and more to honor. And as you guys said, there's a lot of events going on. Earlier today, during the earlier evening shows, we were at a documentary screening, and later we'll be at a candlelight visual at the home where Robinson was shot in 2015. And we're going to show you video of that shooting. Here you can see dash cam video from a squad car of Madison police officer Matt Kenny entering a home and shooting Robinson. The white officer shot Robinson, a 19-year-old black man, after responding to a call on Williamson Street. Reports from the State Department of Justice says Kenny shot Robinson 7 times, and Robinson was not armed. Right now, Kenny is clear from any wrongdoings in connections to this death. And again, as Sarah mentioned earlier, in 2015, this sparked national attention and protests all around Madison. 10 years later, the family is continuing to seek justice. And again, there's a lot of events going on right now. A documentary screening and this poetry slam are happening simultaneously, basically. And in the next hour, the family told me that they're going to march from Cafe Coda down to Williamson Street, block off the roads to honor Robinson at the home where he passed away at. And I will be there covering everything, and I'll have that full report tonight at 10 p.m. Reporting in Madison, Tanasia Shaw, News 3 Now.
All right, Tanasia, thank you. A Mount Horeb man charged in the accidental shooting death of a friend will spend the next 5 years in prison. 23-year-old Isaiah Miller pleaded guilty to homicide by negligent handling of a dangerous weapon. In 2022, Dane County Sheriff's deputies arrested Miller following a shooting at a home in the village of Blue Mounds that killed 19-year-old Marshall Levi Iverson. Prosecutors allege that Miller admitted to playing around with an AR-15 when the gun went off. Today in court, Iverson's mother shared her frustration with what she believes is a light sentence.
No grieving family and no parent should ever have to sit in a courtroom and accept that their child's life was taken like this, then watch the system treat it like a slap on the wrist. And at the end of the day, Levi's life mattered, and the sentence for taking that life should reflect that. This charge doesn't.
Witnesses allegedly saw Miller drinking alcohol, smoking marijuana, and using Xanax on the night of the shooting. Miller's prison sentence will be followed by 5 years extended supervision.
Well, the snow left behind by yesterday's storm is almost gone. Let's check in now with Chief Meteorologist Blaze Keller with what's next.
Yes, we are looking at another round of snow as we go into your Friday. We had plenty of sunshine today. That was allowing some of that snow that we got yesterday to melt. It is still on the ground, and we're going to add about an inch at most across a lot of southern Wisconsin to the snow that's on the ground now by the time we wrap up Friday. Beginning around midnight, going into your Friday morning, expanding and really at its peak from the late morning hours Friday into the mid-afternoon hours. This is our next system moving on through. This is going to be more of that wet, heavy snow because we're not going to be cooling down a whole lot behind this, and our air temperatures are going to be above freezing. So we're not going to have that light, fluffy snow this time. As we head into the late afternoon through the early evening, a lot of us will be drying out, and by about 7, 8, maybe as late as 9 o'clock tomorrow, we will watch as the last of it wraps up across southeastern Wisconsin. In the meantime, clouds are going to be increasing as we go throughout the rest of your overnight hours. We will eventually settle into those upper 20s to low 30s tonight. In the full forecast, we'll take a look at just how much snow we could receive, who could see the most, as well as the 60s set to return next Monday in the full forecast.
All right, thank you, Blaze. Well, taking a meat cleaver to federal funding would be wrong. That's what University of Wisconsin System President Jay Rothman says about the Trump administration's proposed cuts to grants from the National Institutes of Health.
Our Armand Rahman spoke to researchers leading breakthroughs in neurological diseases that could come to an abrupt halt.
Administrators at the University of Wisconsin-Madison appealing now to lawmakers, saying any cuts to NIH funding jeopardize not just the future of their students and staff, but the lives that are saved beyond the laboratory.
We're on the verge of having the holy grail of epilepsy research for the last century.
On the verge, but pulled back. Avtar Rupra's NIH grant of $3 million was up for review in February.
And the meetings were canceled.
Now the breakthrough epilepsy drug his team discovered that can block the molecule in the brain that causes seizures, blocked by a potential gap in federal funding.
The seizures disappear within days, and they remain gone for many, many months after that, at least in our animal models.
Professor Rupra says they were ready to begin clinical trials to fine-tune the drug in a matter of years. But without this grant,
my lab will wind down probably by summer.
Just last year, UW-Madison led the nation in brain imaging to research the causes of Alzheimer's and dementia.
It's a testament to these NIH-funded entities' willingness to work together and create solutions faster so that we can respond to the current public need of this disease.
But much of that could be on the line if federal funding is cut.
There's a lot of uncertainty right now about where all of this will land. And so we're trying to be cautious about how we spend money. We're trying to scenario plan.
The Trump administration says capping grants for indirect costs that cover electricity, maintenance, and oversight will save the government $4 billion a year.
Do them wisely, do them carefully. The abrupt nature of this change is what's killing us.
But now researchers like Rupra are preparing to lose experiments, expertise in labs, and above all, progress.
We are poised to change the lives of millions of people for the better, and that will just be put on hold, if not extinguished forever.
Reporting in Madison, Armand Rahman, News 3 Now.
And still ahead at 6, as the Trump administration continues to make massive cuts, thousands of people in Wisconsin are worried that Medicaid could be next.
When we come back, I'll dig into potential Medicaid cuts and what they could mean for Wisconsin's most vulnerable.
You're watching News 3 Now at 6.
Just last week, the U.S. House of Representatives passed the Trump administration's budget proposal. It included $4.5 trillion in tax cuts. An analysis by the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office says the plan cannot be reached without reducing spending on Medicaid. And that clashes with commitments from Republicans who say they won't touch the program. Sarah introduces us to members of the local disabled community who are in fear over what's next. Sarah?
That's right, Eric. These are just some of the faces of Medicaid, which serves more than 1 million people in Wisconsin. If the Senate and House agree on the plan, the House Energy and Commerce Committee will have to find $800 billion in savings, a number that's impossible to reach without slashing Medicaid. Now we're talking about 1 in 3 children, 55% of nursing home residents, and almost half of disabled residents in the Badger State.
35-year-old Tyler Engel was born with spinal muscular atrophy.
My hand, the other one. Oh, yeah.
His arms are slowly getting weaker.
In
a wheelchair since the age of 3, Tyler has been independent since 18 and has quite the resume. He has degrees in physics and mechanical engineering and is currently working as a researcher studying respite care and the caregiver crisis, not to mention knitting as a hobby.
I'm waiting on a sweater right now, too.
Tyler admits he's on edge due to the possibility of cuts to Medicaid.
It's always been in the back of my mind, but it's been in the front of my mind lately, yeah.
He relies on Medicaid for health care and caregivers and is especially frustrated by the president's suggestions of waste and fraud.
We're not going to touch it. Now, we are going to look for fraud.
Show me what it is.
Tyler's own research shows Medicaid has some of the lowest rates of fraud in the country.
Let's start with CIA or even the senators. How much fraud and waste do they have on their end?
We invited Tyler and a panel of others representing the disabled community to dig deeper.
Medicaid is a shared resource.
Patty Becker's son, Will, uses a Medicaid waiver in order to keep his job at the Hy-Vee in Oregon. Patty is also the director of program operations at Community Living Alliance, a nonprofit that helps those with disabilities.
Right now, for someone to live in one of our state centers is $45,000 a month. For somebody to receive community-based supports through IRIS or family care is $4,500 a month. There isn't physical capacity for everyone to physically move somewhere, right, where they're going to stay, as well as that income or that cost to us as taxpayers will dramatically increase.
I enjoy staying busy.
29-year-old Lily Giroux has epilepsy and cognitive disabilities due to her seizures. Her mom, Ann, explains how Medicaid allows Lily to live independently, using a job coach, and to keep her on track at the Hy-Vee store in Madison.
The alternative is perhaps a facility, a long-term care facility, or 24-hour care, or going to the ER more often. That's more expensive than this preventative care that's what Medicaid is.
And then there's Krijan Olsen, a researcher in healthcare access who has cerebral palsy herself and whose teenage daughter also uses a Medicaid waiver. And all of these families have to prove they need Medicaid every year.
Someone comes to our home annually and does an evaluation that's extensive, reviews all of her educational and medical records.
We asked if Medicaid doesn't cover services, where do they go?
The local hospitals. We just lost a couple hospitals in the Chippewa Valley area in Wisconsin. It has a big impact. People are traveling 2 hours to get mental health care because they don't have a hospital offering it. And this is all part of the continued ripple effects of having a deep cut in Medicaid.
And it's hard to see the consequences until it's too late.
We think about with the pandemic when all people stopped shopping, they stopped going out, they stopped eating. This could have a similar effect on local communities. Because if we're doing community-based stuff really well, you don't notice it, right? And then that's good. Which is hard when it comes to these moments for all of us, because you can see the pothole.
Yeah, big time.
You won't see Tyler at home alone in his apartment. That's what will happen if there's no one to help him get out and get to work.
Despite Tyler's fear about his future, he continues to fight for his care every year, as long as it exists.
I lose my home, I lose my job, I have to live with my parents. Who knows, probably end up getting sick, and it could easily cost me my life.
As you can see, there is a lot of fear and uncertainty out there, and not just for those in the disabled community. And there is understandable confusion over the numbers as well, Eric.
And you can see why. Always a lot of back and forth going on in Washington. What's next in this budget process?
Well, as we talked about, you and I, Senate Republicans have pushed through their own budget framework earlier. So now the two chambers will work on a common plan to the president, but he has signaled that he supports this House plan we've talked about over the Senate one.
Good story, Sarah. We will stay tuned. Thank you. Still more ahead on News 3 Now at 6.
After the break, the TSA gets ready for spring break season, what they're forecasting for this year's air travel.
And speaking of forecasts, we'll be seeing much drier conditions for the rest of the week. Blaze returns with his outlook when we come back.
You're watching News 3 Now at 6.
Welcome back. Spring break season is officially underway.
Hard to believe. The TSA says the peak travel period runs from today through March 24th. They're expecting the number of air travel passengers to increase by more than 5%. So if you're planning to fly anywhere, be sure to get there early and be prepared for long lines. Well, temperatures will soon be feeling like spring as well. Blaze is back now with the complete forecast.
That's right, 60s to start off next week. It's going to be a quiet weekend as well. 40s on Saturday, 50s on Sunday. But we got to get through some light snow once again as we go into your Friday. Future track 3 a.m. beginning to see some of that light snow flurry action moving into southwestern parts of Wisconsin, parts of Crawford, Grant County, maybe into extreme western Iowa and Lafayette counties, dealing with some of that light snow. As we go through your morning commute, so we're going to have to plan for likely a snowy commute, the area of southern Wisconsin affected by the snow is going to expand. But notice it's staying south of the Dells. I think if you're in parts of Juneau, Adams County, into the La Crosse area, north into Watoma, Green Lake, Marquette counties, you're actually probably not going to be dealing or see any snow as we go throughout your Friday. The peak is going to be between the late morning hours and the early afternoon, or the mid-afternoon, excuse me, and then we start to wind down as we go into the late afternoon into the evening. Looking at about an inch or less for a lot of southern Wisconsin, closer to the state line, closing in on probably an inch to an inch and a half. The ground is warm and our air temperatures are also warm, above freezing. So a lot of this is going to melt as we go into your day on Friday. Take a look at your planner starting out in the 30s and cloudy. There's that snow sticking with us through at least the mid-afternoon, and then we quiet down as we go into later parts of the day. Most of that snow accumulation, or the higher snow accumulation, staying to our south, though we're not likely going to see any winter weather advisories out of the National Weather Service in Milwaukee. That to me reaffirms that our thoughts with that higher snow total being to our south is likely what's going to happen. And as I mentioned, 60s to start off next week. We're about 5 to 10 degrees above normal, and we stay well above normal as we go throughout next week, with a couple more 60s as we go into the second half of your upcoming work week. Remember, we spring forward on Sunday when we're in the 50s, and we could return back into the 60s to end next week. Stay with News 3 Now. We'll be right back.
The top 10 finalists for the Patty Kazmaier Award were released. It's an award given to the best player in women's college hockey. And which school do you think had the most players on that list? Well, there's only one answer: Wisconsin. Caroline Harvey, Casey O'Brien, Kirsten Sims, and Layla Edwards all made the cut ahead of the WCHA Final Face-Off semifinals. And the key this time of year is, as Mark Johnson likes to say, clear the space in your head and play free, something the Badgers have been doing all year long.
For us to play our best game, we can't really play with that fear. We have to trust each other, trust that our ability is good enough, and that when we play our game, we're going to come out on top. And so I think we've done a really good job of not focusing on that and not thinking, if we mess up, if we don't play well, we're going to lose. We just focus on a positive outcome, and it's worked for us so far.
And speaking of the women's hockey team, be sure to check out this week's Wisconsin Huddle with Kirsten Sims. Show airs tomorrow night at 6:30 right here on News 3 Now. High school boys hockey, McFarland back at state for the first time since 2000, taking on Tomahawk in the Division II semis. No score in the second. Spartans on the power play, and Nolan Sturmer goes corner pocket to light the lamp and give McFarland a 1-0 lead. But Tomahawk would answer back. Braden Lamer paints the post, part of 3 straight hatchet goals. Spartans come up short in the semis, 3-2, the final, and Cap City girls playing right now. We'll have highlights of those at 10.
All right, Zach, thanks. Quick final check, please.
Quiet tonight. The clouds will move on in. Maybe some flurries after midnight for southwestern Wisconsin, but the snow really holds off until Friday. From the late morning through the mid-afternoon, we're looking at about 1 to maybe 2 inches at best for southern Wisconsin.
Take it.
Blaze, thanks. Thanks for joining us for News 3 Now at 6.